Welcome to Solo Journeys podcast, where every journey begins with a single step. I'm your host Sasha, and today I talk to Bruce Chalmer, a psychologist with over 30 years of experience in couples therapy. We tackle one of the toughest questions: is cheating the end of a relationship? Bruce also shares the formula that helps couples keep the spark alive, and we dig into why so many men actually resist going to therapy. Hi, Bruce. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, well, I am Bruce Chalmer, and I'm a psychologist in Vermont in the United States. I've been doing this in private practice for over 30 years now. And for the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, 8 or 10 years, something like that, I've been focusing almost entirely on couples work. I used to do a lot of work with individuals and some with families, but more and more I've really focused on couples work because I've really enjoyed that. There's something very, very compelling about it. It's also very inspiring when I can help a couple heal, and healing doesn't always mean staying together, but when I can help them heal from the hard stuff they're going through, it feels like it's more than just them that are being helped. There's always wider systems involved. You know, they have kids, they have families, they have communities. Healing a couple really seems to be helping heal the world in some way as well.
Do you have a success rate?
Well, I don't measure success by whether they stay together or not. There's no simple way to measure success in couples work because there are at least three different opinions involved. There's the two people in the couple, and there's me. Of course, my opinion is the least important of those, but they often don't have the same opinion of whether it was successful. Sometimes a couple will come in and they end up splitting up, and one of them is saying, "Wow, I knew this is just what we needed, and I this really provided clarity." And the other is thinking, "Well, this is a total failure. I was hoping it would save the relationship." And I respect both of those opinions. And sometimes a couple splits up and they both consider it a success. And sometimes a couple stays together and I'm not so sure. Now as I say, my opinion is the least important one. It's really difficult to measure success that way. So I don't do it. I don't keep track of that. The very first question I ask people after I've given a little intro about how this all works in terms of confidentiality and stuff like that, then I say, okay, here's my favorite opening question. How will you know if this is helping? So I invite them to focus on that right from the beginning, and often we'll ask that question again if it seems like it's not clear. They say they don't always have the same opinion on that.
Yeah, so it's a very personalized approach because each situation is very individual.
Yes, very much.
Okay, thank you for this opinion. It sounds more complex than one can think of. What is the most common problem couples come to you with?
Thinking in terms of, not necessarily a majority, but a plurality. In other words, maybe it's not over half, but it's certainly the most common one. It's infidelity. I didn't go back and count carefully, but when I was writing the book that came out about 5 years ago, I did kind of a guess, and it was close to half, maybe a little under half of the couples that I work with are dealing with infidelity in the first session. And if it isn't infidelity, there are other kinds of betrayals that people experience that aren't necessarily infidelity, but they're often dealing with that. And then there's lots of couples that aren't dealing with that, but they're very often dealing with the fact that, they still love each other, but they feel miles apart. They feel like they just don't the warmth isn't there, the spark isn't there. They still care about each other, but they just don't, they're just not happy with each other. And that's often very common as well.
And in this situation, what would you say? Is there a chance to gain this spark again, or
Yes, often, not always, but
okay?
often, yeah. And that's a lot of the work. And even in the cases of infidelity, other kinds of betrayal, often a lot of the work is rediscovering intimacy. And I don't just mean sexual intimacy, I mean intimacy more broadly. One of the things I talk about with couples, again, almost always in the first session, my first sessions are pretty structured. After that, it's kind of free form. But the first sessions are structured. And one of the things I almost always cover is the distinction between stability and intimacy. So often, again, there's exceptions, but most of the couples that come to see me are pretty good at the skills of stability. Usually they're not dealing with mental health issues, for example. Almost everybody I work with isn't crazy. And that's another thing I tend to point out in the first session. They don't need me to tell them that, but I'll often note that. Well, in terms of stability, neither one of you is crazy. That's good. And I don't mean to be making fun of serious mental health issues, but that most of the folks who see me they're not nuts. So that's not the problem. That can be incredibly destabilizing. They're usually not cognitively impaired at all. They're intelligent. They're able to understand what's going on. And usually they don't have serious substance issues, although occasionally they do. That does come up. That can be very destabilizing. But most of the folks I work with are pretty good at the things that keep things stable. The problem they're having is intimacy. The skills of stability are all about avoiding anxiety or keeping the anxiety level low. The chief skill of intimacy is to tolerate anxiety without freaking out totally. And that's where they usually have trouble because the stakes are very high. And when they want to do something that's going to raise anxiety, for example, just giving a simple complaint, you just want to complain something about something to your partner. If they've had difficulty with that, that becomes hugely anxiety producing.
Hmm.
And then they suppress it. And when they suppress it, it just gets worse. And of course, it's not just things like complaints, it's even things like in the sexual domain, saying to your partner, you want to try something and you're worried they're going to think you're weird for wanting to try it. Or even not in the sexual domain, just, you're thinking, oh, I want to try moving somewhere else together for a while, and I'm worried you're going to think I'm crazy for trying that. Or I want to try starting a business and I'm worried you're going to put me down or think that, it's a terrible idea, whatever. All these things that involve being honest and open with your partner
Hmm.
require tolerating anxiety because a lot of times it's very anxiety producing. So that's the skill that people often don't have because it rocks the boat. They're worried about stability. Trouble is both stability and intimacy are needs. In other words, if you suppress intimacy, it becomes destabilizing. My favorite metaphor about that is if you think about a seed that gets planted in fertile soil and it germinates and it sprouts, starts to grow, and someone comes along and paves a sidewalk over it. Why would they pave a sidewalk? Well, it makes it more stable. It's easier to walk on.
Hmm.
But that seed is not just going to sit there. It's going to try and crack the sidewalk. The seed has roots for stability, but intimacy is the energy for growth. And I think that analogy applies to people, it applies to couples. Any living organism wants to be intimate with its environment. And if that gets stopped, it'll try and metaphorically crack the sidewalk. And what that looks like in a couple, when the couple is trying to crack the sidewalk, sometimes it looks like an affair, not always, but often. Sometimes it looks like they can't talk about anything without getting into a fight, even if it's trivial.
Hmm.
Everything leads to a fight because they're constantly on edge. Sometimes it leads to one partner or the other all of a sudden, without warning, saying, I can't stand it, I'm out of here. Sometimes it leads to one or the other partner getting very depressed because
Hmm.
lack of intimacy is very depressing. So all of those things are possible.
And do you think infidelity is connected to the process that you just explained?
It is often, I don't want to say always, there's lots of reasons that infidelity happens. Usually there's some context in the relationship that made someone more vulnerable to doing it. Occasionally not. Occasionally somebody will say, no, I love my partner and we have a great sex life and it's fine. And I just was tempted. That happens occasionally. But those aren't usually the people who come to talk to me. They may not have realized it, but something was not working in the relationship. And the person who did the cheating, I'm not letting them off the hook morally. Morality is still important. Often, when they're coming to see me, the person who did the cheating is feeling terrible about it. And they're saying, yeah, I can't imagine I would ever do that, but I did that. And the other person, of course, is very hurt. And, there was something in the relationship that probably was setting the stage for it.
Hmm.
Now, that's usually the people I'm working with.
Provocative question. Do you think cheating is a reason to break up?
Well, it often is. I mean, that's not my decision to make, of course. Certainly, that is often the thing that precipitates a couple breaking up. But I will note lots of couples I work with, and again, I don't have numbers on this, but lots of couples I work with where there's cheating manage to stay together. And when they do, the only way they do is that their relationship is better than it was before
Oh,
because the way the relationship was before, that was the context of the cheating. You have to be careful. It's a thin line between looking at the context and blaming the victim. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to blame the person who is cheated on for the other person's cheating. Both members of the
involved.
couple, they were involved. They were both part of creating that context. And the couples that can look at that without freaking out are the ones that have a possibility of staying together. And I have a word for the mindset that they are showing when they do that. The word I use for that is faith. And I don't mean religious faith. I mean faith that reality somehow is right to be what it is, even when it's painful. It's the folks who can come in and say, when the person who was cheated on, let's say, and that person is saying, well, look, I know my partner isn't crazy. I know they're not evil, and yet they did this. And yet, but I know them to be a good person. There must be something we better look at here and both of us understand to see if we can move forward together. That's faith. The folks that come in, and this happens pretty often, the people will come in and the one who did the cheating will say, I'm so sorry, it's terrible, I'll never do it again, I must have been crazy. And the other person who was cheated on is saying, yeah, and what we need is we need rules, and I need to check your cell phone all the time. You have to report to me where you are all the time and all that stuff. I have to become your probation officer, essentially. That those couples,
That doesn't
that's not
sound so healthy, honestly.
it's not. They often feel that way at first. That is not showing faith. That's just saying we want to deny reality. We want to deny that this happened. We want to insist it was just an anomaly in the universe. Something went wrong, forget about it, we'll move on. And it doesn't work.
Basically, it can hinder the process of
Yes,
healing.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what I'm offering in sessions more than anything else is that faith. Now, again, I can't, I can't give somebody an injection of it. You can't learn that faith by reading about it. It's not knowledge. It's not a question of what's correct or not correct. It's a mindset.
How long does it take to heal the relationship?
I've seen couples that seem to heal very quickly. Usually it's not like in a session or two, but I've seen that happen occasionally. It just takes a while for both parties to be able to understand the new realities
Mm-hmm.
and adapt to them. The most recent book I wrote about called Betrayal and Forgiveness, How to
Mm-hmm.
Navigate the Turmoil and Learn to Trust Again. I'm not talking about forgiveness in the sense of restoring the relationship. I'm using forgiveness in a different sense. I'm talking about forgiveness simply meaning sometimes people call it an inside job. In other words, I can forgive somebody that I don't trust. I can forgive somebody I have no intention of restoring a relationship with. The forgiveness is about me. The forgiveness is about saying, okay, I can think about this and not go into fight or flight. I can think about this and not be angry anymore. I can accept that it happened, even though I don't like it.
So it's more egoistic. Forgiveness is for yourself, it's not for another
Yes.
person. Interesting thought.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when they talk about this, like to quote the novelist Anne Lamott, who has a wonderful quote about this. She said, to not forgive is like drinking rat poison and then waiting for the rat to die. If I'm hurt by someone, I need to get to the place, especially if I'm considering the possibility of restoring a relationship, I need to be able to get to the place where I can think about it without being overwhelmed with anger or rage or, just compulsive rethinking all the time. Then I can think about, okay, is it possible to rebuild trust? That's not an inside job at all. That involves both parties. Rebuilding trust is a two-way street.
How do men and women behave? Who initiates? Who plays the more active role? Because I assume that men are a little bit, let's say, they are more skeptical about the effect and the reason. And
Yes, yeah, your your guess is quite correct. Men tend to be much more reluctant to go, and women are the ones who want to do it. I've seen occasional exceptions, of course, but that's overwhelmingly the rule. The vast, vast majority of couple sessions that are set up, it's either a woman who made the contact or it's a man who made the contact because a woman told him he had to, or that was it. So it is women want to do it and men don't. Now, why would that be true? Women think that he's saying he doesn't really care enough about her to try it. Or women will often say he's just clueless. He just refuses to understand. He won't listen to me. And of course, what the man will say is, well, I'm fine. You're the one with the problem. You go get fixed. But I think what's going on most of the time isn't that we don't care, which is often it seems that way to the woman. What's going on in the man is fear. He's terrified. He won't say it to himself because we as men, we don't want to admit when we're afraid, even to ourselves. He's right to be terrified. He's worried that what's going to happen if they go into therapy is that, first of all, the therapist will take the woman's side, not the man's side, because therapists often do. And again, I don't take sides at all. I don't think there should be sides. But often what will happen is therapy is much more women's domain than men's domain. Women can usually talk rings around men when it comes to emotions. And so immediately the guy's at a disadvantage. And he's worried that what's going to happen to that is she's going to realize what a jerk he is and leave him, possibly because he's been a jerk. And he knows that. So he's afraid of that. Or he's afraid that therapist is going to basically convince her to leave him, saying, well, why are you with somebody who treats you so badly? Which again, sometimes happens. So his fears are reasonable. If she's able to say, really, what are your concerns about doing it? Tell me what are you worried will happen? If she can actually understand and validate that, she say, wow, I hear what you're saying. You're right to worry. I understand that is a possibility. I want to go because I am worried that we're not going to last. I don't want us to break up. And I'm thinking this might help, but you're absolutely right. We could. Then he's apt to consider it. He's apt to say, oh my God, wow, we're really in trouble, aren't we? Maybe we should do this. But when she's yelling at him, it doesn't work. He'll just say, oh, you're the crazy one. If you can understand, oh, you're worried we'll split up if we go. Yeah, I'm worried about that too. That doesn't solve your problem, by the way. You could then end up deciding together, well, then let's not go. Let's see if we can do this without doing that. But often that's what will get somebody, all of a sudden you're in it together instead of it being a contest. So that's what gets past somebody's resistance if he senses genuine respect. It's like, wow, you're actually wondering what I'm worried about. And of course, for the guy, that invites him to actually think about it, which guys tend not to do. We're not nearly as good as that as you women are. But generally speaking, we don't have language for our emotions the way women do.
I will be honest, I'm very surprised with what you just said, how you named the reason why men don't go to the therapy.
Uh-huh. Yeah, what are your thoughts about it? Because you don't have to agree with me either. What are your thoughts about that?
But I think it makes sense. Women are a little bit more aware.
Everybody has emotion. We all have them.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have better language for it. And that awareness is about having language for it. It's often surprising. I've noted this over the years. Lots of women I've talked to are just surprised at the idea that the man in their lives might not know how he's feeling. He may not have words for it. It just seems really foreign to women that a guy could not know.
And we even take it for something else, that he doesn't want to talk or he doesn't trust you, maybe even.
Yeah, I think that is very often true. Now, I don't want to leave the idea that, oh, so it's all up to women to fix this because you're better at it. If we want our relationships to go okay, we need to learn some skills. We're never going to be naturally as good at it as most women are, but we do need to learn some skills to be able to have those conversations. It's like we're in territory that we're not fluent in, so we don't quite know what to do.
Only this thought already gives a little bit of direction how women should take it, just to understand what is behind, not because you are rejected. It's a physical capacity of this
Yeah.
human being.
Which again, it's not like he can't learn. He can learn some.
He needs to wish to learn.
Yes. And of course, to wish to learn, you have to believe it's possible.
I see. This is very inspiring indeed.
Ah.
There is a way to align between those two female-male worlds. What would be top 3 recommendations for couples that are going through difficult times from you as a therapist?
The first one is about get hold of yourself first, rather than trying to get hold of your partner's emotions. Practice the idea that says, okay, we're going to start with the assumption neither one of us is crazy. Step 1, calm down and figure out if people are behaving badly, there are reasons for it. I'm not saying that they're justifiable morally, but there are reasons for it. So calm down to that point, and then you can develop some curiosity.
Thank you. Well, I think that was quite eye-opening for a woman to see a little bit of a man's world. And I think we should all do a little bit more in this direction to understand each other, build a solid foundation for relationships. Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks for having me on.
Today we learned that healing in relationship is not about quick fixes. It's about courage, self-awareness, and choosing faith over fear. Bruce reminded us that stability and intimacy are both essential, and that growth often requires tolerating the anxiety that comes together with being fully open. Whether you are navigating betrayal, longing to reconnect, or simply wanting to strengthen your partnership, begin with curiosity and compassion. In the next episode, we discuss with Bruce the topic of intimacy, what it really means, why it matters, and how couples can rediscover it. So stay tuned, you don't want to miss it.